Not entirely, not fully, not in the way you thought. You chose your career, your beliefs, your social circles. But how much of it came from you? And how much from the invisible pressure to belong? From your culture, your trauma, your fear of being alone. Now imagine stripping all that away. All expectations, all attachments, all roles. You're free, truly, absolutely free. But it doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like standing at the edge of a vast empty plain with no map, no tribe, and no voice telling you where to go. You can take any path you want, but no one will cheer you on. No one will even know. And in that moment you feel it, freedom and loneliness, holding hands. This is the paradox we rarely dare to name. The soul-twisting contradiction at the heart of the modern self. We crave freedom, we glorify independence. We build our identities on rebellion and self-expression. But when we finally step outside the crowd, when no one is left to define us but ourselves, we often feel abandoned, disoriented, even hollow. Why is it that the more free we become, the more alone we feel? Why does the journey to authenticity so often lead us into psychological exile? Philosophers have long warned us about this. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is condemned to be free, not gifted, condemned, because with radical freedom comes radical responsibility, and with it, the terror of being untethered." Nietzsche called it the death of God. Not a theological claim, but a cultural one. The idea that once we break from tradition and authority, once we declare ourselves autonomous, we are also severed from inherited meaning. We become the sole authors of our lives, yes, but also the sole witnesses. And what is freedom, if there's no one to witness it? What is the value of selfhood if no one affirms it? You see, freedom isn't always fireworks and open skies. Sometimes, it's silence. Sometimes, it's a dark room where the only voice left is your own. And even that voice is shaking. Because now you're not just free to choose, you're free to fail, free to be rejected, free to become nothing. And that's what no one tells you about real freedom. It comes with isolation. The kind of isolation you feel when your friends forget to text back. No, the deeper kind, the existential kind, the kind that whispers, you're alone in the making of yourself, and no one can help you do it. It's the solitude of shedding the masks, even the ones you loved. The painful clarity of knowing you can no longer blame your parents, your past, your environment. You are the sculptor now, and the marble is you. So maybe the question isn't just how do we become free. Maybe the better question is, can we survive the cost of freedom? Or deeper still, are we mistaking freedom for something it's not? Is it possible that what we call freedom is often just disconnection dressed as self-determination? That behind the pursuit of liberty lies a quiet desperation to escape, not just society, but ourselves. As you sit with these questions, you may feel a quiet dissonance vibrating through your chest, the sense that something is off, something unsaid, something unseen. That feeling is the beginning, because to understand the paradox of freedom, you must look beyond the slogans and into the silence it leaves behind. You must ask, what did I really want when I said I wanted to be free? Was it freedom, or was it love without conditions? Was it liberation, or was it the right to finally be myself and still be held? The answers don't come easy, but once you begin to see the shadow behind the light, the emptiness behind the autonomy, you can begin to understand the true cost of awakening. And from the hidden problem, the path begins psychological, philosophical roots. So what exactly are we missing? Why does freedom, this ultimate modern ideal, so often leave us adrift rather than elevated? To answer this, we must dig beneath the surface of culture, and into the undercurrents of the psyche. We must trace the problem not just through society, but through ourselves. It begins with a story, a silent one you inherited long before you had the words to name it. From the moment you were born, you were shaped by touch and voice, approval and punishment, attention and neglect. You were wired not only biologically, but emotionally, to seek connection. As developmental psychologists Gabor Mate and attachment theorists have shown, human beings are not isolated islands. We are relational creatures. Infants can survive without freedom, but they cannot survive without love. This sets up a dangerous trade-off. The moment we sense that being fully ourselves threatens our bond with others, we begin to choose belonging over authenticity. A child who laughs too loud, cries too much, or questions too early may learn that their raw expression comes at a cost. They begin to suppress, to edit, to contort themselves to stay safe. This isn't manipulation, it's survival. Carl Jung described this process as the birth of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world's expectations. But for every mask there's a shadow, everything we've repressed to maintain. The illusion of acceptance. And this is where the problem begins. We grow up thinking we're free, but we're still wearing the mask. We confuse the right to express ourselves with the capacity to know ourselves. We become experts at appearing autonomous, but inwardly we're haunted by what we've exiled. The parts of ourselves we had to reject in order to be loved. The voice that says you can choose anything you want, while secretly fearing that your choices will isolate you further. You may become free in the eyes of the world, but you still live in fear of being unloved, unvalidated, unseen. And because the mask worked once, it kept you safe. You wear it longer than you need to. Here lies the contradiction. But we've built our entire lives around strategies for avoiding abandonment. This is not just personal, it's deeply cultural. The modern world praises individualism. We are told that success lies in standing out, owning your identity, being independent, but simultaneously we're bombarded with images of what freedom should look like: curated, performative, marketable. We internalize these expectations. We become brands, archetypes, avatars, and the more we strive to be ourselves, the more we feel the pressure to perform that self to an audience. Sartre called this the gaze of the other, the idea that as long as we're being observed, we're never truly free because our actions are always shaped by how they'll be perceived. Even rebellion becomes a script. Even our uniqueness becomes a uniform. So what happens when you strip it all away? When you stop seeking applause? When you finally detach from the scaffolding of external validation? What remains? For most, the answer is terrifying. Silence. The silence of not knowing who you are without the mask. The silence of facing the parts of yourself you've ignored for years. The grief, the rage, the hunger for connection you've buried beneath performance. That silence is the price of awakening. But it is also the birthplace of truth. Because here lies the deeper insight. Freedom, in its truest form, demands that you risk being misunderstood, that you act without guarantees, that you show up in your full complexity even when no one applauds, agrees, or stays. True freedom requires you to break the spell of the mirror, to stop living as a reflection of who others need you to be. This is why it feels like isolation, not because freedom is empty, but because we've been trained to equate connection with compliance. Because the moment we stop mirroring others, many will no longer see themselves in us, and they will leave. That departure feels like abandonment, but it is actually a clearing, a space in which the self can finally emerge, not as a reaction, but as a creation. Nietzsche saw this as the task of the Bermensch, the one who transcends inherited values and carves new meaning from the void, not as an escape from humanity, but as a return to it, reborn. Viktor Frankl, having survived the horror of concentration camps, said it differently. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is where true freedom lives. But to enter it, you must first leave behind the need to be seen, understood, or affirmed. You must be willing to walk alone, not out of pride, but out of necessity, because only in solitude do you discover which parts of you were chosen, and which were given to you by fear. At first glance, everything seems normal. People laugh in cafes, post photos of their best lives, make weekend plans and chase dreams. Cities hum with movement, calendars fill with obligations. From the outside it appears we're more connected and empowered than ever before. But look closer, not at what's being said, but what isn't, not at what's shared, but at what's buried, and you'll start to notice a silence louder than words. A subtle sense of disconnection, like static beneath the noise. We are, as a society, more free than ever, politically, socially, economically, but we are also more medicated, distracted, and anxious. Rates of anxiety, depression, burnout, and suicide are rising. Loneliness has been declared an epidemic by multiple health organizations. What happened if freedom was supposed to liberate us? Why are so many quietly unraveling? The answer lies not in the visible systems of control, but in the invisible patterns of avoidance. The ways we unconsciously run from the discomfort that freedom brings. We've mistaken the removal of external constraints for the presence of internal clarity. But freedom without self-understanding is not liberation, it's disorientation. And in that disorientation, we reach for anchors. Any anchors: validation, belonging, dopamine, algorithms, approval. We scroll for hours not because we're curious, but because the moment we stop, the emptiness creeps in. We jump from relationship to relationship, not always out of love, but from fear of being alone with the chaos of our own thoughts. We work endlessly, not just for ambition, but to outrun the silence. Beneath this all lies a paradox. We fear control, Yet we also fear the abyss of pure autonomy. Cognitive psychology offers insight here. Human beings are wired to avoid uncertainty. The brain craves predictability. It builds habits, heuristics, and identity shortcuts to reduce cognitive load. This is efficient. It helps us survive, but it also traps us, because when the environment no longer tells us who we are, we don't feel liberated. We feel lost. In a society where roles are fluid, truths are relative, and meaning is no longer inherited, we are forced to invent ourselves from scratch. And while that sounds empowering, it's also terrifying, because most of us have never been taught how to face that blank canvas. We were taught how to achieve, how to fit in, how to be somebody, but not how to sit in the void, not how to choose a path without applause, not how to bear the weight of our own freedom. So we grasp, we identify with tribes, movements, aesthetics, anything that gives us a sense of identity, and we confuse that identification with authenticity. But often, it's just another mask, another persona in the theater of self-expression, another shield between us and the terrifying possibility that there is no pre-written script, that we must write it ourselves. This is why, when people do begin to awaken, when they finally take off the mask, the first emotion they feel isn't joy. It's grief. Grief for the years spent chasing approval, grief for the self abandoned long ago, grief for friendships that were built on mutual avoidance, not truth, and most of all, grief for the realization that true belonging may require temporary exile. We don't talk about this enough. We praise authenticity until someone becomes too real. We celebrate individuality until it challenges the comfort of the group. We post quotes about freedom, yet live inside cages made of likes, metrics, and filtered expectations. This isn't just psychological, it's systemic. Modern economies are built on dissatisfaction. Consumerism thrives not by offering solutions, but by stoking hunger. We're constantly shown who we should be, what we lack, how we compare. This fuels the myth: if I just buy the right thing, achieve the right status, find the right partner, I'll finally feel whole. But wholeness can't be consumed. It must be confronted. And this confrontation, this meeting with the self, is what most people avoid their entire lives. They distract, perform, numb, project, blame, because to meet yourself in the absence of external noise requires a kind of courage that feels almost inhuman, that it requires you to see all the ways you've betrayed your own voice, to forgive yourself, to reclaim your soul, piece by broken piece. And until you do that, you may achieve everything and still feel nothing. This is the tragedy of modern life. We are free to choose, but most of our choices are reactions, not creations. Reactions to fear, to loneliness, to unprocessed childhood wounds, to societal pressures we never agreed to but internalized anyway. So the unseen consequence of freedom is not liberation, it's illusion. The illusion that we are awake when we are actually sleepwalking in masks built by fear. The illusion that our life is self-directed when it is, in truth, a carefully curated avoidance of pain. The illusion that we are known when the self we present to the world was constructed to survive, not to be seen. But there is a way out. It begins not with rebellion, but with reckoning. Moment of terrifying stillness in which you admit, I don't know who I am without the noise. And in that admission, the first door opens. The rebellion. How to break free. Imagine this. You've finally silenced the noise. No notifications. No expectations. No roles to play. You are alone, not in a room, but in yourself. That at first, there's peace. Then, a slow rising panic. Like standing at the edge of a dark forest with no map, and knowing the only way forward is through. Most people turn back, because this is the part no one tells you. Waking up is not graceful, it's violent. The moment you begin to see through the illusions that shaped your life, the brands, the beliefs, the personas, it's not clarity you feel first, it's disintegration. The old self fractures. The stories no longer stick, and what remains is not a polished, authentic you, but a question mark in human form. So how do you begin again? How do you reclaim freedom without falling into isolation? The answer isn't comfort, it's not affirmation, it's not a self-help checklist or a morning routine. It's rebellion, but not the kind plastered on protest signs. This rebellion is inward, silent, relentless. It is the act of choosing presence in a world addicted to distraction. It is asking again and again, what part of me am I abandoning right now to feel accepted, safe, or successful? Let's be clear. This isn't about dropping out of society or rejecting all norms. It's about stepping back enough to see them for what they are, tools, not truths. To break free, you must first learn to sit with discomfort, not as an enemy, but as a guide. The discomfort of being misunderstood, of not belonging to any tribe, of failing without applause, of living days that are quiet, unspectacular, and deeply real. Because that's where true freedom begins, not in escaping loneliness, but in befriending it, not in finding meaning outside, but in birthing it from within. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But what does that look like? It means no longer chasing identities, but confronting your patterns. It means asking not who should I be, but who have I been pretending to be. It means seeing how you've built your entire life, to avoid a single fear of being nothing. And here's the paradox. Only by being nothing can you become anything to truly rebel. You must die to the story of what success looks like, of what you should be by now, of who you need to impress. You must let go of the idea that there is a destination, some perfect version of yourself waiting just beyond the next achievement. Instead, you begin to move from essence, not ego. You speak less to be heard and more to be real. You create not to perform but to feel alive. You choose solitude, not because you hate people, but because you no longer fear your own mind, and slowly the fog lifts, not all at once, but in pieces. You realize freedom is not the absence of limitations, but the ability to choose which ones you will serve. You stop reacting to life like a wounded child, and begin responding to it like an awakened soul. You become your own reference point, your own compass. And yes, this may cost you. Some people will leave. Not everyone will understand the new you, especially if the old you made them feel safe, superior, or validated. That's okay. The rebellion was never about being liked, it was about being whole. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But making yourself, really making yourself, is an act of war, a war against every story that said you were not enough, a war against the temptation to numb, to conform, to shrink. But as you fight, something incredible happens. You stop needing the world to reflect your worth because you've met the part of yourself that cannot be tarnished by opinions. You stop begging for connection because you've built it with your own soul. First. And from that place, you can love without losing yourself, create without craving applause, speak without needing to be right. This is not freedom as fantasy, it is freedom as fire. It burns away everything false, everything small, everything safe. And in its place, something fierce remains. You. Raw, reclaimed, real. So when the silence returns, and it will, you no longer fear it, because now you recognize it, not as isolation but as truth. Why true freedom feels like isolation. Imagine for a moment that you are floating in a black ocean under a sky full of stars. No land, no noise, no one, just you, surrounded by eternity. And then, suddenly you realize something terrifying. You've always been here, even when you were surrounded by people, even when you laughed at dinner tables, succeeded in front of crowds, performed your roles to perfection. Deep down, a part of you was always alone. But here's the twist. That wasn't your curse. It was your truth. The final realization, the one most people avoid their entire lives, is this: you are born alone, and you die alone. But within that aloneness is your greatest power. Because when no one is there to mirror you, validate you, or fill the silence, what's left? Only one voice, your own. And in that voice is freedom. Not the freedom to do anything you want, but the freedom to be who you truly are, without masks, without roles, without illusions. All your life, you've been told that connection is the antidote to isolation. But here's the paradox. True connection only becomes possible when you've embraced your aloneness first, when you no longer seek others to complete you, but to reflect what you've already found within yourself. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote of the Burmese, the one who transcends herd morality to forge their own values. It's not about superiority. It's about authenticity. It's about becoming so rooted in your own center that you stop orbiting around others. But this kind of freedom is not euphoric. It's not a motivational poster. It's not something you post online with a hashtag. It is sacred. It is silent. And yes, it is lonely, because most of the world still runs from this truth. They crowd their days with noise. They crowd their minds with opinions. They crowd their hearts with substitutes for meaning, consumption, praise, productivity. But deep down, a war is still being waged. And they feel it. They feel it every time the room goes quiet. Every time the phone is set down. Every time the phone is set down, they are left with nothing but themselves. But you have stood in the fire. You have not run. You have tasted the strange clarity that comes when everything falls away. And in that clarity, you see, there is no final arrival, No perfect version of you waiting at the end of some self-improvement plan. There is only this. A moment, a choice, a presence, and in that presence you become whole again. This is the ultimate truth. Freedom is not found in escaping your isolation. Freedom is what happens when you embrace it, because once you realize that your aloneness is not emptiness but a space of infinite creation, everything changes. You begin to see others more clearly, not as saviors or threats, but as fellow travelers. You love more deeply, not because you need to be loved back, but because love has become your nature. You live more fully, not because life is guaranteed, but because it isn't. And maybe, just maybe, you smile at the silence now, because it no longer scares you, it welcomes you home. So here you are. The war inside your mind is quieter, not gone but transformed. The voices of fear, comparison, and doubt may still whisper, but you know now, they are not you. They never were. You are the space between the thoughts. You are the awareness behind the mask. You are the stillness that remains when the performance ends. And in that stillness, you have found it. Not belonging, not applause, not even clarity, but something far more powerful. Peace, the kind of peace that no one can give you, and no one can take away, because it was always yours. Waiting, inside the isolation, inside the silence, inside you.